Hello and welcome to episode 59, he says, not confidently, to Elves, Rings, and Nerdy Things. We are covering this week number 2 of the Jackson Hobbit trilogy, The Desolation of Smaug. Sam, are you ready to talk about this cinematic masterpiece?
I am ready. Now you say that. Are you being sarcastic?
No, actually, we talked about the last episode with Unexpected Journey that was my favorite of the 3. But when I rewatched this one, I was actually pleasantly surprised at how my opinion of it has morphed over the decade that it has been in the public. What about you?
Yeah, I will say it was better than I remember. My opinion of it has improved. My complaints are relatively straightforward, and I wonder if a lot of this is just to do with the visual aspect of the movie. For whatever reason, when I watched it in theaters and whenever I had seen it prior, I think it was that, that frame rate issue, or that. I mean, this one has a ton of CGI, and that gets a little jarring. But when you just kind of let go a little bit, don't be so nitpicky about certain things, it's an enjoyable experience. I liked it.
Yeah, I would say for me it comes down to cinematography and then those added storylines, and we'll get to those because that rears its ugly head in this one, I think.
Detrimental at additional stuff?
Yes. Yeah. But then we talked about the last episode how there's stuff that's added that enhances it as well. So we'll just be sure to make sure we delineate which one was bad and which one was good as we talk about this film.
All right. Well, I like that. So do you want to jump in?
Yeah, we both took notes. So what we're going to do is just kind of go sequentially from beginning of film to end of film. We might skip some parts, or Sam may have skipped a part that I didn't. So if I have a note that's kind of jumping ahead, Sam, just let me know that you have something to fill in a gap, and we will just go from there. My first point is about the cold open to the movie. We have a meeting between Gandalf and Thorin in the town of Bree. We get references to the Dwarven Ring of Power. We get a cool backstory on why they actually need the Arkenstone and what the whole purpose of this journey is about. And then we get a very too on-the-nose Jackson cameo.
It's literally the exact same cameo from The Fellowship.
Yeah, I did not need it. I didn't like it. I don't even remember what his cameo was in Unexpected Journey.
Oh, yeah, I don't either.
I don't remember seeing it.
I don't.
But this one in particular, it's one of those moments where it was too much fan service, where fans would go, oh, yeah, that's him. Ha, ha, ha. But to me, like, it took me out of it for a moment. And I was like, it was cringy. I didn't feel like I needed it.
Well, let's jump ahead real quick to the other cameo in this movie.
Okay.
Did you catch it?
Oh, Stephen Colbert.
Yeah.
That I actually really liked.
Okay, so let's talk about that. So when Jackson did it in the original trilogy, it was funny.
People, and it was a different character every time.
Different character every time, and different. Oh, to be quite frank, it's a different Peter Jackson, right? That was not the Peter Jackson that had helmed the very successful Oscar-winning, mega millions making Lord of the Rings trilogy. So it's a little bit different, a little more maybe tongue-in-cheek. Back during the Lord of the Rings, when he's in the Hobbit, especially since it's the exact same cameo in this one, it's a little lazy. Like do something slightly different.
60 years before, it's the same guy eating the same carrot.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so my notes from this section were, one, I think Thorin says that he heard a rumor that his father was wandering in the wilds.
Mm-hmm.
And then my initial thought was like, oh, did Gandalf spread that rumor in order to have an encounter with Thorin? Or actually, more likely, as we learned, since there's a bounty on Thorin's head, did the forces of evil spread the rumor to draw Thorin out?
Thorin out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was kind of fun. And then you mentioned the importance of the Arkenstone. I have a note on that as well. And then later on, I have a note about how they kind of rewrite the lore for the dwarves here, where they mentioned Durin, the line of Durin. They mentioned the seven. Do they call them the seven tribes of dwarves?
Seven kingdoms of dwarves.
Seven kingdoms of dwarves, which they make it. They give the impression as if the Arkenstone. I mean, they say the Arkenstone will give you the power to like summon the seven kingdoms of the dwarves to your aid.
Kind of like they've sworn their allegiance or oath on the Arkenstone, so you kind of need it to summon their power. Yeah,
exactly. Which that's not really how that works. Like the Arkenstone was, I don't, correct me if I'm wrong, and I maybe should have gone back and read the Hobbit to double check this, but the line of Durin, the Longbeards technically, is one of seven different houses of the dwarves. And even the dwarves that do show up at the end, spoiler alert for the next movie, an army of dwarves shows up from the Iron Hills. That's the same group, the same Longbeards. We don't really meet any of the other dwarves in The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. They're mentioned and they figure into the story in Silmarillion. But there's a little bit of rewriting here, which it's fine. You want to make the Arkenstone a little bit more important than just like the symbol of the kingdom or like the kingship under the mountain. And especially because it becomes clear that this is really about getting Smaug defeated and removing him off the chessboard. So it's okay, but for people who know their lore, might irk them a little bit.
Yeah, it didn't irk me at all. I was happy with it. Like that's my thing with Rings of Power too. Like if you're going to change lore, at least make it make sense.
Yeah.
So the change of lore in this instance, it made sense to me. Of course, this is why you want the Arkenstone. Then every fucking time, we're always like, I'm not going to brag on Rings of Power, but there's just so many opportunities to do so. And the instances of them changing lore and it didn't make sense, then that's what irks me. But when Jackson does it with the Hobbit trilogy, I feel like more often than not, it's believable on the stuff that he's changing. And it's at least rational.
Yeah, I mean, you already established the Arkenstone. First of all, the Arkenstone is a real thing from The Hobbit. And it's not as if you're altering it significantly. It's not like you're saying, oh, the Arkenstone's actually a Silmaril, right? And I think that was one of the huge things that was just such a massive turnoff with the Rings of Power. Is the invented backstory to Mithril and how it's because the Silmaril was in a tree at the top of the mountain and the lightning struck. Is like that just doesn't make any fucking sense. Like it doesn't make sense from a physical standpoint, assuming that all of like the magic of the Silmarils and whatnot is real. It doesn't make sense from a story standpoint, from a natural standpoint. Like what is a tree doing at the top of the mountain? Like there's something called that the tree line, right?
Why is an elf and a Balrog fighting?
Yes, why
at a tree on a summit of a mountain? Yeah,
why have we heard of this before? All of those reasons. But then it's like, okay, so the Arkenstone, it's not just the symbol of kingship for the kingdom under the mountain. It's actually like the Lord of all dwarves. Okay, that's not that big of a stretch. It doesn't do anything to your, common point. It doesn't require the suspension of disbelief.
Let's move on to Beorn.
All right.
I really dig everything about the character Beorn in this movie. I think the physical appearance of someone who is a skin changer, I think they did really well. Just a giant man with overly hairy features. I thought the bear that he transformed into was awesome. I like that the personality shifts. So Gandalf has a line where he says, the man can be reasoned with, but the bear would kill you. I really like that the signifying how dangerous Beorn could be and how important it is, especially to not startle him. And I know that's an extended scene and it's straight from the Hobbit book where the dwarves come out 2 by 2 and they get the signals wrong and they end up startling Beorn because they're trying to make sure that it's a small number, or he thinks it's a small number. But I liked everything about Beorn. I liked his house. I liked the giant bumblebees, that he kept all these animals. I just want more lore around skin changers in
Mhm.
Tolkien's universe. I know they talk a little bit about the backstory that the goblins and orcs either captured or killed all the skin changers because they wanted to do it for sport or whatever, and that's why he hates Azog so much. And actually, I have an RPG set in the world of Tolkien. It's called Adventures in Middle Earth.
Oh yeah, I've flipped through the handbooks.
Yeah, so I've got like 4 or 5 of those books in the series, and they never got permission from the Tolkien estate, so they had to cease and desist
Oh really?
creating the RPG books. Yeah, so now you can only buy them on eBay for like an ungodly amount of money because
Oh yeah.
they're not in print anymore.
So you're sitting
But
on a gold mine.
I only have like 5 of them, but one of the playable races, I believe, is a Beorning skin changer,
That's cool.
which that's just cool lore that you could build upon that Tolkien just doesn't go into. But what did you think about Beorn?
So I have a couple of notes here. I generally will agree with you about like it's a cool character. I think one of my issues, and this popped up several times in watching this movie, is there are certain sequences or scenes that are just stretched out way longer than they need to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I did feel as if some of the time with Beorn was like that, where there are a lot of shots of not really anything happening. Just like let's move on, right? I think the dwarf introduction thing, as you said, is an extended scene. It's from The Hobbit, but do you really need it in this movie? Like we already established that. Once you establish that he is threatening, but not a threat to you, you don't need to draw that out. And so that for me, the payoff to that scene wasn't worth the setup. Um,
Well, that's if we were doing an episode on differences between theatrical and extended cut of The Hobbit, I would agree with you that that scene
okay.
doesn't need to be in there at all. It's nice to see because it is an exact copy from the book into the movie. So I can appreciate it for that. But I do agree with you in the extended cut. It does end up feeling like a lot of the stuff could be removed. And
Yeah.
the theatrical version does a really, really good job of introducing Beorn, establishing him as a threat with the bear chasing them at the beginning. But then, if I recall correctly, they just go straight into Beorn is in the house serving them breakfast when Bilbo wakes up.
Yeah, that I think that's the case. I don't recall. I haven't seen the theatrical version in a while. There was, speaking of Rings of Power callbacks, or I think there's a shot with Beorn's horses kind of roaming majestically in the field, and I just wrote down horse glamour shots, which reminded me a little bit of that infamous scene from Rings of Power. But we don't need
No,
to
it's
go
our
into detail.
second reference.
Oh no. The One thing about the Beorn stuff that did get me a little bit was the force perspective, because you have Gandalf and Beorn and Bilbo and the dwarves and the animals, and there's just like a ton of stuff, and so everything looks a little. I know they're trying to emphasize the fact that Bilbo is a halfling and Beorn is gigantic, but in reality they're all just human-sized actors, and they don't do a good enough job, I don't think. And maybe it's just because they had so many actors to deal with, where it's easy enough if it's Gandalf and a hobbit, right? It's easy enough if it's a dwarf and Gandalf, but it's hard when it's 13 dwarves plus Gandalf plus Bilbo plus Beorn, and Beorn's already like kind of CGI'd and affected.
I was gonna say, and Beorn is technically a lot, like significantly larger than Gandalf.
Yeah.
So you have small, medium, and large characters, D&D reference, all in the same setting, trying to show that height difference.
Well, the small and large can occupy the same space as long as they're friendly.
Yes, they can stand in between their legs. This scene in particular, I had a moment where I realized I wasn't bothered at all by older Ian McKellen playing Gandalf.
Yeah, I have to agree with you there. It seems like he yeah for whatever reason there were some shots in the first movie in this trilogy where he looks like very old, and then he
Yeah.
looked pretty good for this entire movie.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, my final thing here, and this is more toward when they part with Beorn, is Gandalf gets a gigantic exposition dump regarding Dol Guldur and the Witch King, and it kind of sets off his actions for the rest of the movie, which is a little interesting to me. That Beorn just like happens to have all of this information. I don't mind it too much, but it's a little convenient, especially
Well, it
because
wasn't all Beorn, because he gets when Gandalf takes in that information, he's still going to go with the dwarves until he gets to the entrance of Mirkwood and sees the eye, and then has Galadriel talking to him in his head.
yes, that is true. But in his conversation with Beorn, Dol Guldur and the Witch King are mentioned, or the Witch King is referenced. I don't think he's mentioned by name, but he is.
Yeah.
The dead are walking, or whatever it is, in the North Fells. And so I was like, okay, so how does, technically speaking, that's on the other side of the mountains. How would Beorn know about all of that? Which, again, grant whatever, fine. It didn't bother me too much, but it was noticeable, especially because in the very next scene, you've got Galadriel telepathically telling Gandalf about this stuff that he needs to go
What's going
investigate.
on? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, the next big scene, we cut down to Dol Guldur. And I have two.
Do we, or do we? Is it?
That's my next note.
Well, I have notes about the initial like Mirkwood stuff.
Oh yeah, but I didn't really care about any of that.
Oh, really? Okay.
Do you have stuff? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
So I actually really liked how they did this, to a point where you can see kind of the degradation of the dwarves and Bilbo's well-being, and they're getting really sleepy, and they're making bad decisions, and they're getting lost. And I liked kind of the escalation of the effects of Mirkwood and this kind of haunted forest, and how Bilbo, he climbs to the top of the tree and gets fresh air, and he's rejuvenated. And there's even a hint that it's kind of spores of evil mushrooms that are causing them to become disoriented.
Mm-hmm.
I will return to this fact that it was a little long. You could have cut it down, and I think it would have been maybe a little less taxing, a little less boring, and you still could have gotten across the effect that you wanted to go for, which was the magic forest caused them to become disoriented, opening them up to the attack by the spiders.
I remember watching this and thinking that the sound effects did a good job of making me feel claustrophobic.
Yes, yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah. So Dol Guldur, this is our introduction to Bolg. And until we found Bolg, I thought Azog was the worst. And then Bolg made his appearance. And I was like,
Bolg is terrible.
He looks so much worse than Azog. He has metal armor growing into his skin.
He's like a Borg from the Next Generation from Star Trek. It
looks
bad.
so out of place.
Yeah,
it really does. Like juxtaposing that with how cool Dol Guldur looks, where you have, and we'll get to it later when Gandalf actually goes to Dol Guldur, but there's like gibbets with skeletons hanging in them. There's rusted iron, like all over the stone, and it just looks really cool to me.
Mm-hmm.
But then you have Bolg, who to me is the worst orc in the entire series, personally.
Yes.
I do have a note that I forgot to mention about Beorn when he's talking to the Gandalf and the dwarves.
Mm-hmm.
It's a reference to me more of the Hobbit book and the Rankin and Bass movie, where Beorn says the elves of Mirkwood are less like their kin, less wise and more dangerous. And when you watch the Rankin and Bass film, there is a completely different look to the high elves versus the wood elves. And I thought that was a cool, this line at least made me think of that difference in appearance.
Okay.
And it's less so there's like no difference in appearance in the movie, but you have Thranduil, who, at least in terms of wiseness, if you're going to compare him to Elrond, is a lot different in terms of personality wise, as we've seen in an elf up to this point.
Yeah. Well, so you mentioned that Bjorn goes out of his way to differentiate. The old Hobbit movie, the animated, shows them as completely different styles, which I appreciated. And I actually made a note, and I guess we are going to jump ahead a little bit. Let's pause for a second and say, is there anything about the spider fight that you, because that's what happens in between the.
Yes, I actually have two things.
Okay, so let's hit those real quick.
The first thing is when, going back a little bit, when Galadriel is talking to Gandalf in his head, there's a flashback to old Dunedain throwing the Witch King into a tomb. That was so cool. I loved the scene.
Again, yes, that was really cool. It was fun to see the old, like the Men of Arnor. Technically speaking, the Witch King was never defeated. His body was never destroyed and buried. But
I know,
yes,
still cool. Yeah. And then my one thing about the spider fight, I really liked that when Bilbo put the ring on, he was then able to understand the speech of spiders. That was that was a very, very cool enhancement of the ring, that if you were to wear it, then you would understand and be able to speak to evil creatures inherently. That was awesome.
I agree with you there. I had a similar note. Oh, one thing I did see is, you know, that scene where Bilbo kills the smaller spider that like pops out of the trapdoor after the ring falls off. Like, it's pretty brutal. And it reminded me of Gollum. Like, Bilbo looks very similar to how Gollum looked when Gollum was like smashing that orc with a rock. Yeah. And I think that was intentional, just to demonstrate Bilbo's attachment to the ring. Okay. So now jumping ahead to the encounter after the spider fight, when the elves show up and kind of finish off some spiders, you have a line from Legolas where he takes Orcrist from Thorin and says, "Oh, like, this is an elf blade made by my kin," which got a little bit of an issue with, because not really your kin there, then Legolas. They're kin to Elrond. Elrond is a direct descendant from Turgon, king of Gondolin, but not Legolas. Legolas is depends
on how far back you want to go. To like waking up underneath the stars.
Sure, but so even then you have,
because that's the only point where all of the elves were together.
That is correct.
Correct. Yeah.
But even then, Turgon was a Noldo. So he was in the second group of elves to wake up, a Noldor. And Legolas is a Sindar. As far as we know, he's like totally just purely Sindar. And that was the third group of elves to wake up. So they don't even, there's like no overlapping family tree. The one area, and I'm trying to recall my Elrond genealogy, but I don't think there was any intermarriage between Noldor and Teleri in Gondolin.
Yeah.
Technically, I guess the question would be, who actually forged Orcrist? So theoretically, it could have been Eöl, the Dark Elf, who was a Sindar. So maybe that's how they can explain it, but
I don't think they're getting that particular.
I don't think they're getting that deep. I think it was just a throwaway line to give Legolas, like, you already had Elrond say that in the first movie, so it's just kind of like a throwaway.
Yeah, my only note with this whole scene was, just because Legolas is alive doesn't mean we need him in a larger role. So
my note real quick was that Lee Pace looks younger than Orlando Bloom.
Elrond in the first movie, and I guess he comes back in the third, but it's still a relatively small role. Galadriel, relatively small. If you're going to create, I can't even remember her name, the female elf.
Kate from Lost.
Yeah, but what's her? Toriel. If you're going to have Toriel created as a new character, have her be the one interacting with the dwarves in this moment. Let Legolas be in the kingdom with Thranduil, have him make his cameo appearance and have a couple interactions, but he doesn't need to have this large of a role because he's not in the books. So this is one where I just wish I remember really liking that Legolas was in it the first time I saw these movies. But then as I've aged, I've just thought, a cameo would have been perfect.
It's like the polar. Well, it's of a kind with the Peter Jackson cameo. It's like give us a half second of Legolas there, like in his father's throne room. Maybe like throw him a line, right, in the throne room, and then have Toriel be the focus. Or how about this? Like invent another romantic, an elf, not Legolas, who can be a potential romantic foil for Keely in the Toriel like love triangle, right? And then have that person die or something like that, right?
Yeah.
Like I don't know. You don't need
Well, because
Legolas.
they even kind of make it seem like Legolas and Thranduil are Noldor and that she's the Sindar.
Well, she says Sylvan elf,
Yeah.
which I guess, technically speaking, the Sindar and the Sylvan elves are much closer than the they're all basically Teleri. The
Mhm.
third house is just who left on the great journey from where they awoke and who lingered in Middle Earth or refused the summons. But they kind of go out, they go out of their way to emphasize, to say that multiple times, like, oh, it's such a lowly Sylvan elf. And then it's also kind of weird because we never get a hint of Legolas like having any romantic interests. He's basically kind of asexual in the Lord of the Rings. Like even Gimli.
Until Yeah, until the comments of Thranduil towards Toriel. That's like the first instance of us knowing that there's a relationship there. And it's just Thranduil going, Legolas has grown fond of you. And it's like,
Yeah,
but
like
he hasn't shown it.
like a friend, like
Yeah, what do you mean?
Legolas is firmly in the friend zone with you.
Yeah. My only other comment before the barrel scene while we're in Thranduil's kingdom is that the Lord of the Rings told us it took a shit ton for elves to get drunk.
Yes, you're right.
And all of the sudden, these elvish guards are so weak that they're going to get shit faced off of the men of Lakewood's wine and get so drunk and sauce to the point that all of these dwarves are able to escape. Like it
Yeah,
didn't make any sense to me. And I know that's the whole explanation of how they're able to escape from the elves in the book. But the films, I've already established that. I mean, Legolas drinks like 10 beers and then is like, I can feel it in my fingers. So how many fucking bottles of wine did these two
yeah.
elves have to drink
You
to
want I just came
be
up with
so
an
drunk?
explanation.
Okay.
That's because in Rohan they're drinking mead and beer,
Not wine.
not wine, and it's not the alcohol, it's the sulfites.
Okay.
There we there you go. There's your
Okay.
explanation.
Yeah. I just remember noting that where I was like, wait a minute. Jackson already told us how difficult this is. And all of a sudden it's not that difficult anymore. But
Well, when they were writing the Lord of the Rings, they wanted to write that scene. They probably were not a mad. Damn it, this is really going to paint us into a corner when we make the
yeah.
Hobbit trilogy in 10 years. Okay, so one thing before the jailbreak is take the deal, Thorin. Like your freedom and like the friendship of the elves in exchange for some diamonds that in the moment you thought your grandfather should have given Thranduil. Like, come on, take the deal.
Yeah, we get it. You're stubborn. Goddamn.
Yeah. Okay.
Barrel sequence. Way too fucking fantastical. And way too long.
Yes. 100%
Like,
agree.
I just needed the moment that that Keely is able to release the gate and the barrels escape. That should have been the end of the barrel sequence scene.
Oh,
But
that is
that's only like
barely
25% through it. Yeah.
yeah.
When it just keeps going on, and then Legolas jumps on heads and is like, dude, I hit a point where I like fast forwarded through the rest of it because I was like, I can't watch this anymore.
Yeah, I think what oh, here we go. So I'm with Haley. We were watching this together, and she goes, "This is terrible. Like, just it's way too
Yeah, it's
long.
just terrible.
Like, way too long." And I think I wrote down Looney Tunes, and I don't remember if that's something that she said or something that I said, but it's like, yeah, it is so cartoony. And I think again, this is one of the challenges with The Hobbit is it's a children's story. There's goofy and funny moments in the book, and you want some of that in the movie, but
Yeah, but this
it's the
wasn't
it's
goofy. This
it's
wasn't
the
goofy or funny in the book. They made this be goofy and funny.
exactly, and it's this weird juxtaposition where it's like, oh, we're gonna have, you know, Bombor, his barrel's gonna launch out of the river and he's gonna hit a bunch of dudes, and then he's gonna pop up with and shoot his arms out of the barrel and then like spin around and kill a bunch of orcs, while like Keely's shot in the leg and a bunch of the elves are like getting their throats slit, and
Yeah. And then Bomber's going to jump into an empty barrel that wasn't there to begin with.
and sink down to the bottom. Okay, so here's the other thing I was
And how
thinking.
did they not fucking flood?
Yes, that's the thing. In the book, Bilbo closes the barrels to
Yeah.
seal them so that they float. In this, the barrels are open, and all of those barrels would have filled with water, and they would have drowned.
Yep.
Give me a
Unless they
break.
were bailing their barrels the entire time.
Yeah. Okay. Is there anything else? Oh, so the dwarves with the wet t-shirts.
Mhm.
It's so weird because they like have to, like, there are some practical effects with the dwarves. Like you see, like all their fingers are like really thick, right? And the dwarven chest padding, and like
I
when
have
they
a
get
note on that.
wet. Okay, you have a note.
Yeah,
Go.
so I wrote, because it's later on. I think I noted it when they were trying to find the keyhole, that sometimes when they get a close up of the dwarves, it really shows that it's prosthetics.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and it's so easy to tell. And for me, it was mostly arms and hands.
Yes, it's like big sausage fingers and gigantic arms. Like they look like they're all like jacked up on steroids. It's like that's all just rubber padding.
Yeah. But between the barrel scene and us meeting Luke Evans as Bard, I have two things, because we see Gandalf and Radagast at the tomb of the Witch King.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wrote again, I think the tomb looks awesome. I love the inscriptions, like curses above, like carved into the stone.
I love the steps. Like those steps look
Yes.
so they're like a great combination of like a primitive, yet also to do that would require like a significant amount of like skill and engineering in order to
Yeah.
build the scaffolding and carve the rock and put in the thing, but it still looks so.
And they're purposefully making it try to be so difficult to get
Yeah.
there. Yeah.
Yeah.
And remote. Does the movie insinuate that all 9 Nazgul were buried with the Witch King?
Yes, which I didn't like.
Yes, because they were supposed to be 9 separate kings of men. So how would the kingdom of Arnor go about collecting all of the dead Nazgul to put them with the Witch King? And why would you consolidate all of that evil into one space? It
Yeah.
it didn't make sense to me.
Well, okay, so this is jumping ahead to the next movie where we get the fight in Dol Guldur with
White Council.
some of the White Council versus some of the Nazgul, and yeah, you don't need all 9 Nazgul to have been in that tomb with the Witch King if you're gonna put him in there to begin with,
Mm-hmm.
like, because then it's gonna beg a lot of questions, such as, did the wise, like including Glorfindel, who was there when the Witch King was defeated, and I guess they can say he wasn't there, but either way, would they not realize that these are the same 9 evil entities? Because I think that was one of the things about the Witch King, is like they didn't really know who he was at first, and then eventually he was driven out and retreated back to Minas Morgul, and from there he kind of challenged the last king of Gondor, right? But the men of Arnor who fought him, and the men of Cardolin and Arthedain, I don't think they knew that he was a servant of Sauron. They just thought he was an evil person, like an evil king of men, a sorcerer.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway,
let's jump up to Lake Town.
can I say one thing real
Sure,
quick?
go ahead.
It tied back to the barrel scene. It's like, how many fucking orcs attacked this group? Like, we were introduced to Bolg because Azog was called back to Dol Guldur to prepare this massive invasion. And then he sends Bolg ostensibly with like a smaller group, but it seems like hundreds of orcs attacked the the dwarves
Barrels. Yeah.
during the barrels. Like it was just an insane amount, and it's one of those things with CGI because it's like, well, we can just add some more orcs and just keep adding them until it doesn't, until we get an impressive number instead of being like, okay, what makes sense? Okay, we have 20 extras. Okay, here are the costumes. Okay, here's what
Yeah.
you're gonna do.
And they're all down river. So how did they know that the dwarves were going to come in barrels down the river?
Yes,
Like
yeah,
that part doesn't make sense. And that's the thing with like the attack in the Fellowship of the Ring of the Uruk-hai. You know how many there are because you see them charge out of Isengard. And at the beginning of the Two Towers, when they're leaving and they're being chased, you can visually see that it's a significantly smaller number. So everything that happens sequentially makes sense, and
hmm
it doesn't with this scene.
yes. Okay, so let's take us to Lake Town.
We're going to Lake Town. Luke Evans as Bard, I thought is great casting.
hmm Yeah, he's
I
good.
think he's great. Stephen Fry as the master of Lake Town is fucking horrible. I hate him and his little weird,
Alfred.
yeah, whatever his name is, the unibrow creepy guy.
Yeah, he's. I mean, they're so over the top. It gets a little hokey.
When you compare him to every other man, like race of man in Lake Town, they're just so they don't fit in at all. And when I go, how does a guy like that become master of Lake Town? I can't put two and two together.
I think the issue is that you have to like they wanted to give Bard this story, the storyline of being kind of a, for lack of a better term, a revolutionary or an agitator, I think they call him. And in order to make that realistic, you have to go over the top with the master of Lake Town because you don't have enough time to like develop the you don't have enough time to give the master of Lake Town a nuance and make him bad. You just have to make him over the top. So we're instantly rooting against him and we're instantly turned off by him. But in order
But you
to
don't
do
even
that,
have to.
well, I think you do because you don't want to spend too much time establishing the fact that he's a bad guy. You instantly need to show him as
I
like
I
a,
honest to God don't even think they could have reduced Lake Town so much easier where you have the dwarves show up like they do.
Mhm.
They are given access to Erebor because they promise wealth. You don't have to have all of this
oh no, I agree with that.
freedom fighter bard
Mhm.
versus terrible leader of Lake Town. Lake Town gets fucking destroyed in the next movie anyway. So it's not like just say that the leader of Lake Town died and then Bard, who killed Smaug, takes
I
them to Dale and then they create their own new town. Like
I
it
I completely agree with you. The issue is you've got to make 3 movies out of a 230-page book. So what are you going to do? You're going to add some storylines. We're going to spend more time in
dude,
Lake
yeah.
Town. We're gonna we're gonna have the whole customs entrance scene. We're gonna have the Bard and his family scene. We're gonna have the scenes with the Master and Alfred. So just yeah, you just padding the movie. You're absolutely right. The dwarves get to Lake Town, they get provisioned, they go to the mountain. The
And
Smaug
the
comes out.
master of Lake Town eats like a testicle, doesn't he?
Yes, very graphically.
Yeah.
It's but I think
Yeah.
again, they do that because they want to have us not like him, and they need to do it quickly. And so he needs to be physically disgusting. He needs to say things that we don't like, and he needs to threaten characters that we are shown that are that toward which the audience is sympathetic. He does all of those things, and it's still too much time.
Yeah. Have anything
Okay,
else in Lake Town?
well, so yeah, where's this ice coming from on the lake?
Dude, yeah.
It's fall. It's fall. There's no ice. So
It's like early fall.
yeah. Well, we
Like,
know that because they go out of their way to tell us that it's Durin's Day, like 2 days from then.
yeah, it could still, I mean, think about fall in the Midwest in Michigan. Like it could still be like 75, 80.
Yeah. And the
And when
water.
there's that much ice on the lake, that means it's been cold for quite a while.
Yeah. Okay. So other things here. I did, as much as I know it's just a excuse to stretch the movie. The scene where all the dwarves get covered in fish is kind of funny, just a little bit, just a little.
I liked the detail of being able to see the scales of the fish like on their heads and stuff as the fish
Yeah,
was pouring in. Yeah.
like, but and that's the thing. That's the thing. Like, you can still tell that the people who made this movie did care.
Some of them.
Like, yeah, I would have liked it if they had cared and feel like, hey, let's do a little bit less of the like gigantic bloating with the CGI stuff, which we'll get to in the fucking Smaug fight. But
Yeah.
okay, so other things. I don't like the guard's outfit. I don't like the like pointy metal helmet with the turban type look. It just doesn't fit the like Western Northern European feel of Tolkien's universe. I don't know. I kind of would have liked them to resemble the Rohirrim a little bit more, because technically the Rohirrim were
From up
Northmen.
here.
Yeah,
Yeah,
before they migrated south.
the armor of Lake Town looks more historical Middle Eastern.
Yeah.
It reminded me of how the Arabic armies of the Crusades are portrayed
Mm-hmm.
in film.
Mm-hmm. It to me it was a little bit of maybe Mongol as well.
Yes, yeah, that as well. Yeah,
And even and this may have been an actual inspiration for Jackson. Even a little bit of like Conan the Barbarian
mm-hmm.
type, where you just have this kind of weird mix, and it's geographically anachronistic. Okay. Oh, the fact that nobody notices 13 dwarves walking to Bard's house, that was a little funny. The Stephen Colbert cameo, we get the introduction of the Wind Lance. I thought a lot of the Lake Town stuff was just basically too cute, right? The whole like little sequence of all the people spying on Bard, all their little signals, like the dudes with the fishing poles and whatnot. Okay, that's it as far as Lake Town. The next stuff I have is with Legolas and Tauriel.
I have my next scene is the dwarves arriving in Dale. I liked being able to see the ruins of the old city.
That was cool.
And it made me realize when we saw those ruins and we kind of learned about some of that history, Middle Earth is set up perfectly for a series of limited series. Like when we see all of even just Kingdom of Arnor, like Anúminas, like there are areas of Middle Earth that Tolkien talks about that have a rich history and lore to them that you could make a limited series and just cover a certain area over a certain time frame and have like develop some pretty phenomenal stories, I think. But
well, Eve, I mean, just we were talking about the Witch King earlier. Like the Third Age was over 3,000 years, and for a decent chunk of the history, you had the Kingdom of Arnor and its successor kingdoms, and they fought amongst each other, and they fought Angmar, and they eventually declined and dissolved. But yeah, that would be the basis for a limited series. Okay, so I think this came before the dwarves arrive in Dale, but we do get a scene where Tauriel and Legolas are making their way to Lake Town, and specifically Legolas comes upon Tauriel, and she turns around and draws her bow on him, but he also has his bow drawn on her. Like, why would he draw his bow on her if he knows that it's Tauriel and he's sneaking up on her? Like, it makes sense for her to draw her bow on him.
I think my understanding of that was he's trying to show that she could have died.
Oh,
because
okay.
his bow is already drawn, so he was kind of just like making a point, like you definitely, if I were an orc, you'd be dead. So
yeah, so stop thinking lovingly about Keeley
and his poison blood.
Yeah, let's see here. Oh, speaking of Keeley, when the dwarves are raiding the armory and they give all the weapons to Keeley and he walks down the stairs and he falls, he would have impaled himself on something. I would almost guarantee if any actual person fell down a
or
flight
cut
of
himself,
stairs, he would have been messed up. Okay,
he nicks his jugular and just bleeds out on the floor.
Yeah, like that ice hockey player.
Oh God.
Yeah, terrible.
Yeah.
Okay. Did Boffer oversleep in the book?
I don't think so.
Yeah, like they just creating a bunch of
But
drama for no
again, yeah,
reason.
yeah, like nobody, the other dwarves don't stay behind either
Yeah,
because they all go together because
yeah,
Keeley doesn't have a forced storyline with Toriel.
yeah. Oh, and then I guess this is after Dale. There's no when Bilbo sees that statue and it has the stairs in it. He's like, "Good eyes, Master Baggins," or whatever. Like, it's a gigantic fucking statue right in front of you.
How did
You didn't
nobody
see
else
that?
see it?
Okay. And then I think we get the scene back in Dol Guldur with Gandalf, right?
Yeah, and this is where I want to say the stuff with Thrain, I think, should have been kept in because there's a lot there in terms of lore of the elf or the dwarven ring of power. We find out that he had the ring like cut off of his hand, and then it's some pretty major red flags for Gandalf when Azog is like hunting down dwarvish rings of power. That's when
Mm-hmm.
he kind of goes, "Oh my god, this is definitely Sauron. We need to get out of here." That whole sequence is awesome.
Mm-hmm.
I love the visualization of Gandalf using more magic.
The the effects of Gandalf battling Sauron are so good.
Yeah,
And the way that they chose to animate Sauron is awesome. Like
like that
the
smoke.
yeah, the living smoke, the kind of the shadow that can, do what it wants is great. I love that scene. I kind of agree with you about the Thrain stuff. The one thing is like, did we need 8 different jump cuts showing the Thrain person like running around the corridors, right?
No,
Just one
yeah,
of those,
like I'm with you with that. Where it's like just trim it down.
yeah, and just trim it down, and then you could have kept it in the movie.
Yeah, don't trim it to the point where you need to remove it from the film, but trim it to where it's not taking up so much time. But in this battle, though, with Gandalf and Sauron, Gandalf's staff dissolves. We established in the last trilogy, your staff breaking is like this terrible thing. And Gandalf has now lost his Gandalf the Grey staff twice. He lost his Gandalf the White staff once, and then he gets it back by the time they go to Valinor at the end of Return of the King. So I just don't. I want some. I want a policy with staffs
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I feel
because
you.
it just seems to me that like these wizards keep losing them and gaining them and losing them, and I want to know what the real what. How do they work?
I think it's similar to the ring, the Ring of Power, the One Ring, where Sauron pours his own essence into it, and that is what makes it powerful.
So they can just like keep making new staffs over and over
I
again.
Yeah, I guess, but then again, you destroy the ring and you destroy Sauron. So if your staff is destroyed, are you not forever weakened? Yeah,
But then, but then Gandalf destroying Saruman's staff was this huge deal because he's like, Saruman, your staff is broken.
yeah, I
If he's
think
just
it.
gonna leave and go make another one, then what's the big fucking deal?
I think and then the book, there's like a throwaway line about how Galadriel gives Gandalf a new staff, right?
I don't
After
remember that.
when I think it because technically he dies on the top of he dies on the top of the mountain after fighting the Balrog, defeating the Balrog, and he's brought naked to Lothlorien, where Galadriel gives him new clothes, robes him in white, and then gives him a new staff.
But that's like his white staff, not his gray
Exactly,
staff. Yeah.
exactly, and it's like, okay, so and maybe at that point it's like, okay, you're kind of re-embodied and re-empowered, and as a part of that, this new staff is empowered as once we give it to you. I don't know. I think it's one of those, like, Tolkien was never very specific about how the magic worked in his world, and so he just had to buy it. But I think you're right in that in the world of the movies, how does this
We
keep
need we
happening?
need we need consistency.
Speaking of consistency and weapons, the elves in Mirkwood take Orcrist from Thorin. How does he get it back if he's in jail?
I'd have to rewatch the sequence. I don't know if we see Bilbo give it to him or not
Mm-hmm.
right before the barrel scene.
Or like if Legolas had it during the orc fight, and somehow it like fell into Thorin's hands or something. But
Yeah.
I think Thorin gets it back basically, and we don't see how it happens.
Yeah.
Okay.
The last sequence here is pretty much Lonely Mountain, Smaug.
Well, and then also fucking Keeley and his wound. I swear to
Yeah,
God, the last 40 minutes of this movie really drag.
yeah.
Uh,
In a nutshell, we get finding the keyhole. We have
which
the interaction between Bilbo and Smaug. We have the dwarves all charging in to help Bilbo because they feel guilty. We have with the Keeley, Toriel, Legolas, Bolg, orcs
yeah,
sequence.
like a battalion of orcs invade Lake Town to try and
Yeah.
kill a handful of dwarves, and nobody notices. And then the elves just fight them all until Bolg runs away.
And then we have Smaug leaving to go destroy Lake Town. Now, I just have a couple notes in the entire sequence of everything that I just kind of outlined. And for me, my highlights are I liked the idea of the last light of Durin's Day being moonlight.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was a very cool part of the riddle. I hated that all of the dwarves had like just gave up and just walked away. That didn't make any sense to me. The guy who plays Balin is a great actor.
Mm-hmm.
I think he is one of the highlights of the dwarvish characters.
Yeah, he's the heart of the group.
Yeah, by far. Inside the Lonely Mountain, that has to be more gold than exists in Earth.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Like we talked about it in the last movie because they show Smaug like taking over the mountain and kind of like swimming in gold. But then you watch this film and you're like, holy shit, there's like 5 times more gold than they showed us in the first movie. It's like, how?
Yeah, it's like when everything can be CGI, you can do whatever you want.
You just go way over the
And
top.
yeah, and I mean, the phrase suspension of disbelief is one. I said it earlier, you say it frequently when we have issues like this, but it's like it didn't quite break it, but it's really
Close.
really close to it.
Mm-hmm.
One issue I had was when they're trying to find the hidden door, all of the dwarves are blocking the sunlight.
Yeah.
Like, you know, that they're all standing in between the stone wall and where the sun is shining. It's like, get the fuck out of the way.
They're like tapping on the stone too to try to hear. Yeah.
But they're in the shadows of the fucking dwarves.
Yeah.
I wanted to go back and remember if Elrond said the last light of the setting sun in the movie trilogy. And I did, and he says, I think it's the last light with the setting sun is what he says in the movie. I'm like, oh, okay, so that's not the same thing. But like, did they change that from the book? And actually, in the book, it's the last light with the setting sun. But in the book, it's the last ray of the setting sun, and in the movie, it's the moon of Durin's Day, which technically the moon and the sun were in the sky in the same time. So whatever. I initially got a little worked up because like, did they just kind of twist the words around from like the earlier movie? But no, it was fine, and it respected the language in the book.
I enjoyed Martin Freeman's acting as Bilbo during the interactions with Smaug. Specifically, I liked when Smaug starts to move and Bilbo's kind of like measuring how far
funny.
or how big he thinks Smaug is.
Yeah.
And then the moment where he starts to like walk away slowly and Smaug moves, and then he just kind of like squats down and stops moving. It just looks like he's trying to be small. Just comedically played very well. Martin Freeman.
Yeah.
Great Bilbo.
It's kind of a shame that in this movie we don't get enough of him.
Yeah.
Right. Like you kind of want the Bilbo Smaug scene to be similar to the Bilbo Gollum scene, but it's surrounded by so much excess, where the Bilbo Gollum scene was 2 people in a dark cavern delivering excellent dialogue very well together
and acting off of each other.
Yes, and
this
You have a CGI, a gigantic CGI dragon in a gigantic CGI room, and it's just Martin Freeman sitting in like a green screen talking to a tennis ball.
Yeah. And I know Cumberbatch did mocap for this,
So what?
but why? Why did he do
Yeah,
mocap for this is what I want to know.
yeah.
Last thing for me for this movie, I thought Cumberbatch as voice of Smaug did okay. It was serviceable,
Mm-hmm.
but the voice actor from the animated film,
Oh, I had the same thought.
he is so good that it's hard to compare the two.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100% agree.
That's it for me. I'll let you cover any last notes you had, but
Well, uh, just that final fight with the dwarves. Once the kind of Bilbo Smog stuff is over, the direct conversation is over, and it turns into the chase scene throughout all of
Erebor.
Erebor. It is just so long and pointless.
Mm-hmm.
Just get him out. Like there's going to be enough time for action in the third movie with the gigantic battle. Get the dragon out, and even to the point of like you could have killed Smog in this movie, and it would have been a fun end with that. And the lake town is destroyed, and the mountain is free and of open. And as Balin says in the movie, I think actually in the beginning of the third movie, it's like everybody will hear about this. Like the whole North will know that the dragon is dead and the mountain is free. Like, oh, that's a good thing and a bad thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
The goblins are going to show up. The elves might show up. They're, the people, we need to get our dwarf allies here. You could still end the movie on a cliffhanger and kill Smaug if you just cut that under like another Looney Tunes scene of like physics defying, completely ridiculous. You're telling me none of those dwarves would get burned by the fire? Like, come on.
Yeah. And especially because the first Smaug dies in like the first 4 minutes of the next movie. So it's not even like it's a drawn out scene. It's like Smaug attacks Lake Town, dies.
Yeah. Well, okay. So disclaimer, I did watch the beginning of the next movie to see Smaug die, and it's drawn out, as you can imagine, like as these movies are, but you easily could have cut the beginning of this movie and the end of, or excuse me, the beginning of the third movie and the end of this movie, and had Smaug die at the end of the second movie. It's totally possible. Okay.
Final thought for me, I liked it way more than I liked it the last time I watched it, was probably like 6 years ago. Still not my favorite. I still don't like the Toriel, Legolas, Keeley forced love affair. Some of the stuff that they added was good. But yeah. What are your final thoughts on Desolation of Smaug?
So I'm sorry to do this, but I did not like the costume that they gave Bilbo. It looks like he's running around in a bathrobe.
Yeah, that's a nitpick, man.
Yeah, I know, but it's just, I don't know. I wear a bathrobe, during at my leisure, and I don't wear it when I'm going mountaineering.
It looks like he's wearing the same outfit as the dwarves, just without the armor pieces.
Okay, that's probably the case.
That's at least what it looked like to me.
Okay, so final thoughts. Similarly, I had a better reaction to this than I remember having the first time I watched it. I don't think this movie gets to the same heights as the first movie. I think the Gollum Bilbo interaction is still peak so far for these two.
Peak Hobbit trilogy.
Peak Hobbit trilogy. And then the lows in this movie, particularly the scenes that are just elongated pointlessly, I think they reach a little bit lower. So overall, I think this movie is kind of, mediocre, middling, I will say. My impression is still better than it was. It's not a bad movie. It's just middling.
Yeah. Average. And I expect more from Middle Earth.
Indeed.
That's it for 59 of Elves. Oh, God, let me try that again. That is it for 59 of Elves, Rings, and Nerdy Things. I won't choke on my spit this time. We will be covering the Battle of Five Armies next week and then be taking a break because it will be around the holiday season. Happy Hanukkah, Sam, to you. What is
Thank
it?
you.
Day 4?
Day 7.
Is it already day 7?
Day 7. Yeah, we light the. Well, we're recording this on the 13th of December, so tonight we lit 7 candles. Last night of Hanukkah's tomorrow.
Man, this week kind of flew by for me. So because of holidays and all of those things, we will be taking some time off after we publish the Battle of Five Armies. I will be in Michigan, so Sam and I will record Battle of Five Armies probably in the same room. Maybe
we may even have a watch party, maybe with our respective significant others.
Maybe that'll be our first video podcast.
Oh, there we go.
That we can record the two of us talking about it.
Yeah, and it'll be punctuated by periodic eruptions of my child crying or doing whatever, and then probably my dog whining incessantly.
Yeah, that'll be fun.
Yeah.
You can follow us on Facebook, Elves, Rings, and Nerdy Things. You can send us emails at elvesringsnerdythings@gmail.com. We have a Facebook group where we would like to interact with our listeners. We'll post polls sometimes. That is Elves, Rings, and Nerdy Things podcast. So the only difference between that, our page in our group, is the term podcast. If you like what you hear, share it with other people. If you don't like what you hear, stop listening. Bye, everybody.
Bye.